So the second video, we're going to start with talking about avoiding predators, and avoiding predators is really the number one type of prey removal system. I don't know what I want to call it, but avoiding a predator is probably what most species do. One way to do that is to blend into the environment. And here we have the same species of mice, but depending where they live, they have different coatings to blend into the environment. And we believe that this is due to a single mutation and then again, natural selection. The predators are picking out, if you put the dark ones in the light habitat, the dark ones are easier to see, so they get taken out. The light ones breed, and you end up with more light ones. And then the same for opposite if you take the light one into the dark habitat. But again, we do believe it is a single genetic mutation that has caused these mice to change color. All right, and so there is cryptic coloration where they blend, and you can see that it makes it very, very hard to see. Here we have a spider. Yes, there's the eyes right there. And so it blends in with this rocky, sandy soil. And then over here we have a horned lizard. A lot of people call these horny toads. They're not toads. They may be horny. You'd have to ask them. But these are actually an ant specialist. They eat ants, and unfortunately, they're disappearing. They like sandy soils also, and those habitats are disappearing. And the introduction of invasive ants, they don't really like those nearly as much. So cryptic coloration is a, excuse me, a very common way of doing it. The very famous one is the English peppered moth. And so depending on the moth, this is always has been the example in a lot of textbooks for Darwin's natural selection theory. And you can see there's a light and a dark moth on both of these. The light one blends in on the light bark, and then obviously the dark one blends in on the dark. And we saw this with pollution increases in England. As more and more pollution came, the trees got coated with dirt and soot. And so what happened is the darker moths tended to survive more. Now over here on the right, you can see there's a light moth and a dark moth on the same tree. This is kind of like a beech tree. And so there are different areas where they could hide, and that's kind of what would be the typical. And so in a polluted woodland, what you're seeing is, you're looking at the numbers on the trunk or the limb joints. The trunk would be the white ones, and then the limb joints would be, number eaten. Okay, so how many are being eaten? So in a polluted woodland, the ones on the trunk, the white ones would be eaten quite a bit. And then the ones on the limb, not quite as much. But in the ones that are melanic, which basically means the dark ones, you can see those numbers decline, and it's opposite in the non-polluted. So here's how we got this evolutionary change in colors. And actually with environmental protections now, we're seeing that actually shift back. All right, so cryptic coloration works, but it really depends on their habitat. So this is an Australian lizard that in its natural barky, kind of shrubby habitat blends in very well, but you get it out on the open sand and it's pretty obvious. So cryptic coloration only works if you're in the right habitats. All right, stoneflies, just to give you some idea, also what can happen. When their predators are out, which is during the daylight, they will basically look for areas on the dark to rest. And so they will hide. They're vulnerable to predation by rainbow trout when they're on the white surfaces. So when the trout are active, they tend to sit and when they're not active, they tend to go to those dark areas to blend in. All right, and with this is sometimes being just one color is not great. It's about counter shading. Counter shading is the idea that if you look, you have this dark and light coloring. Dark usually on the back, light on the bottom. You can see it's in fish, mammals, and birds. And the idea behind this is if you've got a predator from above, looking down, you're looking up against a dark bottom to make it blend. But if you are underneath this species and look up, you have a light color, so it blends with the sky. And so again, counter shading makes it a little bit harder for predators to view. And that's basically what I said. And they've done studies with this where they've jacked up fish and made different shadows on them. And the ones that aren't colored properly are the ones that are hit more often. All right. And then there's another kind of a little bit different is masquerade. And it's not really camouflage per se in the sense that you're not just blending in. You're masquerading. You're trying to be something else. And so this is actually an insect that looks like a leaf. And if you look, it even has the midrib and veins and pretty extensive. And this is actually what they call a sea dragon, a little bit different than a seahorse, but related. And the sea dragons are found in kelp. So they a lot more secretive than seahorses. And they look like seaweed or kelp. All right, so masquerading, they might be seen, but they think they're plant material, and so they're avoided. And often they'll have spots on them to mimic the idea of leaves turn brown and have bug spots and things like that on them. Also, the ones that look like leaves will actually kind of rock back and forth, acting like it's windy. And so it's kind of interesting how this, again, evolutionary race has created this. And we will stop there.